You're not losing arguments because you're weak. You're losing because you still believe you need to speak up to prove you exist. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you said everything you could but still lost? Have you ever felt the lump in your throat, the exhaustion after trying to justify yourself to someone who never really wanted to listen? I have, and not just once or twice. It was years. Years of trying to explain who I was, what I felt, what I thought, as if my existence depended on the acceptance of others. The truth is harsher than it seems. The more I spoke, the more I erased myself. And it was in this vacuum that I came into contact with Nietzsche, and with an idea that destroyed everything I had been taught, that true power does not lie in arguing, it lies in remaining silent, that the most dangerous person is not the one who shouts, it is the one who chooses silence as their shield, sword, and throne. Remaining silent is not the same as remaining silent. It is taking a stand with a kind of strength that needs no explanation. And contrary to what many people think, it is not cowardice. It is mastery. Because only those who have nothing to prove can master. Those who don't need an audience to know they've won. But this kind of silence is not instinctive. It needs to be built. Because we have been conditioned from an early age to react, to debate, to shout our reasoning until the other person gives up. But Nietzsche saw this as a trap. The more you try to convince, the more you show that you still depend on the acceptance of others. And that is weakness disguised as eloquence. Are you tired of being interrupted, of being misunderstood, of having your calmness used against you? Maybe you're stuck in an illusion that justifying yourself is a sign of intelligence. But it's not. It's a sign of imprisonment. True intelligence is silent. It doesn't compete. It observes. It waits. And when it acts, the world feels it. This video isn't about how to win an argument. It's about how to stop getting into them. It's about regaining your energy, your presence, your sovereignty. Get ready to see silence in a new light, not as the absence of words, but as the loudest sound your soul can make. From now on, Nietzsche will no longer be just a name in philosophy books. He will be the uncomfortable mirror you needed to finally see what has always been yours, the right to exist in silence and still dominate everything. Nietzsche did not write for the weak. He wrote for the few who have the courage to look inward, face their own misery, and transform it into strength. For him, ordinary human beings live trapped by conventions, moralism, and the need for the applause of others. But there is another type of being, rare, dangerous, free. The Übermensch, or Superman, does not live by reacting to the world. He shapes the world in his own image. And what is most impressive is that he often does this in complete silence. The Übermensch does not need to win debates. He does not engage in cheap emotional games. He observes, he understands, and he chooses with surgical precision when to speak, and more importantly, when to remain silent, because he has understood something that others ignore. Silence is a form of language, but not just any language. The silence of the Übermensch does not try to convince. It imposes presence. It is not empty. It is a threat. It is authority. It is the sound of self-control. While others shout, he commands respect with a glance. While others explain, he observes and reveals the weaknesses of others with his calmness alone. His silence is a wall, and those on the other side begin to despair, trying to guess what lies behind it. And in their desperation, they make mistakes. They reveal too much. They lose their balance. This silence is not passivity. It is absolute control of one's own energy. It is strategic economy. The Übermensch knows that every word spoken is a movement revealed. Every emotional reaction is an exposure of a weakness. He remains silent, not because he has nothing to say, but because he does not need to say anything. He has transcended the need to prove anything to anyone. His presence speaks for him, and worse for others, it disturbs them, because it forces others to look inside themselves, to deal with their own noise. In a world that screams, mastering silence is reigning. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as someone who creates his own values, his own rules, his own morality. He does not depend on anyone else's validation, and that is why he is feared. Nothing is more destabilizing than an individual who cannot be manipulated by guilt, fear, or the need for acceptance. Their silence is a shield against all these mechanisms. And when they speak, it is because their words will bring down an empire. But this raises a crucial question. What makes silence so disturbing to others? Let's dive into the psychology behind it, because only when you understand the chaos that silence causes in the minds of others can you begin to see its true power. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it is a mirror, and what it reflects, for many, is unbearable. When I choose not to react, I'm not just keeping quiet. I'm forcing the other person to listen to themselves, to confront their own arguments without the comfort of my resistance. And that's where everything starts to fall apart, because most people don't talk to express themselves. They talk to protect themselves, to convince themselves, to hide the emptiness between what they say and who they really are. And when they encounter my silence, their disguise falls away. Social psychology has shown that in confrontational situations, silence is perceived as judgment. Even if I'm just listening, the other person begins to feel exposed. Without my response, they lose control of the narrative, and their brain goes into alert mode. The amygdala, the fear center, activates. The heart races. The body prepares for a threat that never comes, and this throws them off balance more than any direct attack. She begins to project her own fears onto me. Is he judging me? Did he notice my insecurity? Does he know I'm bluffing? Silence becomes an invisible battlefield, and I watch. Because, as Nietzsche said, the reactive mind is weak, the observing mind is lethal, and there is something even darker. Silence disarms manipulators. People who thrive on emotional control need a reaction to keep the game going. Without my response, the game breaks down. They lose themselves. They reveal the weakness they hid behind their firm voice, their forced laughter, their accusations. Silence also activates old traumas. It triggers pain from rejection, abandonment, humiliation, because suddenly the other person realizes that they are not the center of attention, that their words have no impact, and that is intolerable to the narcissistic ego. But don't think it's easy, because silence also requires strength from me. It forces me to contain the urge to react, to justify myself, to want to seem right. And that's why it's powerful, because it requires mastery. When I choose silence, I choose control. I choose not to give in. I choose to turn emptiness into strategy. And now that you understand what silence does to other people's minds, you're ready to go further, to stop being just an observer, and become someone who wields silence as a weapon. I'll show you exactly how to do it, how to turn silence into conscious, surgical, unbeatable power. Because knowing how to be silent is just the beginning. True power begins when you turn silence into presence, and presence is uncontrollable. There comes a time when silence ceases to be a defense. It becomes an attack, not a noisy attack, but an invisible blade that cuts deep, where no one sees, but everyone feels. This is what Nietzsche understood before any modern manual on emotional manipulation. True mastery begins when the reaction dies, when the impulse to respond is silenced at its root, when the ego learns to shut up, even when it's on fire. The first step is brutal, remaining silent when everything in you screams for a response. That's when the real battle takes place, not with the other person, with yourself. Your body trembles, your mind struggles, your anger wants to explode, but you don't give in, because you know that every word you say is a piece that gives away your game. Every explanation is a confession. Every reaction is a weakness revealed. The second weapon is strategic listening, but not the passive listening of someone waiting for their turn to speak. I'm talking about predatory listening, the kind that detects flaws, fears, contradictions. I listen like a hunter. While the other person tries to affect me with words, I record every detail, and I remain silent. Because when I speak, if I speak, it is like a surgeon cutting emotional flesh with precision. Then comes time. Silence is made up of pauses, and pauses create tension, and tension is pure dominance. While the other person speaks, waiting for my reaction, and it doesn't come, the discomfort grows. Their mind begins to fill the void with assumptions and panic. A simple glance, accompanied by silence, can dismantle more than 1,000 well-formulated arguments. The fourth weapon is unpredictability. I speak when they expect silence, and I remain silent when they expect words. This imbalance creates respect. It generates fear, because those who cannot be read cannot be controlled. And finally, most importantly, don't confuse silence with passivity. Nietzsche would never defend cowardice. The silence we are talking about here is active, intentional, and loaded with decision. It is not withdrawal. It is preparation. It is when my energy is focused, when I choose the moment with coldness and, if necessary, speak only one sentence. But that sentence will be the last. It is this kind of silence that transforms the dynamic. It does not ask for respect. It demands it. It does not beg for space. It occupies it. It does not defend an idea. It tears down the entire stage. To master silence is to master oneself, and those who master themselves master everything. Not all silence is strength. Not all calmness is mastery. There is a kind of silence that does not come from self-control. It comes from giving up, from submission disguised as maturity, from fear masquerading as balance. And that silence destroyed me inside for years. I believed I was being wise by avoiding confrontation, that not responding was a sign of evolution, that swallowing anger was the choice of those who did not want to feed chaos, until I realized that while I was keeping the peace, someone was building an empire in my absence. They talked, decided, manipulated, advanced, and I kept quiet. I called maturity what was actually escape. Nietzsche saw this mechanism with brutal clarity. He called it slave morality, this invisible code that teaches the most sensitive to bow down before the most aggressive, that romanticizes renunciation, glorifies self-denial, and transforms submission into virtue. I was taught to give in, not to bother anyone, to smile even when I was being swallowed up inside. I was praised for being understanding, for seeing the other side, for knowing how to handle everything with wisdom. But no one saw me crumbling in silence. No one heard me imploding inside, night after night. The truth is simple. I was being used by those who understood that I would never react, that I would not scream, that I would rather hurt myself than create discomfort in the environment. And so, I lost space. I lost my voice. I lost the right to be seen. But that changes here. The silence that comes from cowardice must die. This silence that bows its head, that accepts the unacceptable, that swallows its own soul to maintain a false harmony. It needs to be buried, because it is not just silence, it is captivity. Nietzsche wrote for those who decide to break chains, for those who perceive the invisible system that imprisons them and have the courage to abandon it. He didn't want followers, he wanted creators of themselves. And nothing is created when one lives to please others. This is where silence begins to change tone. It ceases to be omission, it becomes affirmation. I don't speak because I owe nothing, because my existence is already forceful, because my presence is already an answer. This silence is not meek, it is absolute, and it makes no apologies. It imposes itself, not with screams, but with boundaries. It rises, not with words, but with a presence that does not retreat. Because there is a brutal difference between being quiet and being erased, and I have chosen never to be invisible again. There comes a time when it is no longer about winning an argument. It's about getting back what I let them take from me. Voice, space, identity. The silence that was once submission is now a wall, and it doesn't matter if they understand me, because I wasn't made to please, I was made to exist whole. Nietzsche called this the will to power. Not as domination over others, but as a reconquest of oneself, not as a cry, but as permanence. The silence I now carry with me is not empty. It is affirmation. It is decision. It is living proof that I don't need to explain anything to be complete. How many times have you remained silent out of fear? How many times have you believed that silence was synonymous with maturity, when in fact it was just exhaustion? How many times have you confused peace with surrender? The silence that transforms is not the silence that swallows pain. It is the silence that shapes it into presence. It is the silence that looks chaos in the eye and does not flinch. It is the silence that says, enough, without opening its mouth. You don't have to beat anyone. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. Nietzsche did not write for those who kneel. He wrote for those who decide to stand up in silence and never bow down again. If this text resonated with something you didn't know how to name, if at any point you felt like I had invaded thoughts you never said out loud, it's because you already know. Silence was never weakness. You were just using it against yourself. Now you have a choice. You can continue to remain silent out of fear, or you can begin to speak with authority. And if, like me, you feel it's time to stop asking for permission to exist, then this is the place for you. Like this video so it continues to live on in the algorithm. But more than that, to affirm that you too carry this new silence, the one that doesn't run away, the one that dominates. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this journey of internal reconstruction. Here, each video is a key, each word is a mirror, and if at any point something here touches you deeply, consider leaving a donation of any amount. Not as an obligation, but as an affirmation that thinking differently, feeling deeply, and living with awareness still has value in this noisy world. Because here, in the territory of the silent mind, every choice you make carries weight, and every silence you learn to master gives you back a piece of who you should never have left behind.